Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. You may be able to hear my dog who is grunting as she has her ears scratched underneath the microphone. But today I spoke with Michelle, a returning guest, and we talked about her new book. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. Thank you for listening to me just waffle for 5 minutes there. And we're going to break ground with the first Lunatic podcast, is that correct?
Yes, David.
Explain this to me.
What would you like to have?
What is the first Lunatic podcast?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me again. I really enjoyed our soulmate dog interview, so I'm happy to be with you again. And when I said the first Lunatic podcast, it's you're my very first interview for the launch of my debut novel, The Lunatic.
Oh, wow.
Which I have for me in my hands.
Very good. So, when did you write that one then? Because when was it I spoke to you about Soulmate Dog?
It must have been in the summer, either at the end, it must have been at the end of last summer, in the end of summer 2024. But the publication dates have very little to do with the long gestational process, David, of the three books that I wrote. And so would you believe that I never thought I would write a novel. I was an academic writer and scholar of French literature. I was in the Berkshires one day, and it was in 2011, and this novel just came and landed in my head, and so I started writing it, much to my own astonishment. And then I think you may know that I became very sick with Lyme disease, and I stopped writing it. And when I was sick in bed those years with the Lyme disease, I kept telling myself the story of this novel. But when I got better, I felt very compelled to write the first memoir, Starving to Heal in Siberia, because it could help people with a Lyme recovery, and then Soulmate Dog, because it could help people and their dogs. So I felt a moral obligation to write those. And then I finished them, and I thought, well, I'm just going to pop open my laptop and see if on my hard drive I still have that draft of The Lunatic. And there it was in 2019. And so it sounds rather vulgar, but it was like projectile vomiting, David. When I opened the document, it had been in my head, really yearning to get out for some years now, because I started it in 2011 and stopped around sometime in 2012. And so one weekend, I went up to the Berkshires, where it's set in Manhattan and in the Berkshires. And I went up for the weekend just to write alone. And I wrote 17,000 words. Never in my life have I written 17,000 words in a weekend. It was just like it was all there, and I was just transcribing it. And so very rapidly, I finished the entire rough draft, and then COVID came upon us. And I didn't want to tell anyone that I was having a good COVID, because I was whisked away in the woods doing all the editing on The Lunatic, and I could go outside. And so, that it worked out very well, because I had all this time, and the novel involves isolation and time apart from others. And so that's how it came together. And now the publishing process is long, as you know. And so it has just come out into the world as of April 1st. And that is not a joke.
It's interesting, though, because that thing you said is, I think sometimes, when people they have this ambition to write a book. And yes. I always say to people when I'm talking on the podcast is, I think what a lot of people puts them off trying to write a book is they're trying to write it as if it's finished. And yet everyone that's written a book understands you just have to make a start. But you might stop and come back to it a few years later. And of course, if that's a sales pitch to somebody, no one's buying it. But it's that wonderful thing that you said, that you wrote something, come back to it in 2019, and then it's like you say, it's just projectile vomit. And in a weekend, there's 17,000 words. And you can't explain to somebody what that feeling is like. Because it just pours out of you, and then at the end of it, you're just kind of like this naked, exhausted body that's got nothing left inside it.
That's right. It's like this. The muse is so mysterious, and it truly is the nature of the muse. And I think that the muse visited me, and then my own physical body got in the way. And when I was down with the Lyme disease, I could, as much as I wanted to, I couldn't really produce anything. And so when my physical body was back up and running again, and I had the time, the muse had not gone away, and it was all still there. And so I think that's just right. You have an idea, and you start to write that idea, and it doesn't even have to be linear. You can start to write somewhere in the middle of the idea, and then and of course, you can never have a finished product when you start to write, and so it just has to organically grow.
Yeah, and it is. I think it's some of the things that hold people back is this idea of a finished article, that it's completed, and they don't. The problem is when people who have written books talk, they talk about the kind of journey you just have to start. But when you say it like that, it's so cliched and just awful. It's the journey, and you don't mean it like that. It's just like, none of us when we start know what we're going to finish with, no matter what idea is there. It's so it's like, I remember when I wrote 22 Flaws, which is about reincarnation from the point of suicide. So you know how it's going to end, and you know how it's going to begin. But the process, that journey, was how I joined the two together. Whereas,
yes.
and people don't understand that quite often that's all somebody has. They just have an idea of where it starts and an idea of where it ends. But that's just 2 pages at the beginning and 2 pages at the end. The few hundred pages in the middle is the journey. And I hate that phrase, but it's kind of how it is.
But it's true. It is true. It is the journey and the explanation and that beautiful process is that all the ingredients are needed and just have to be respected.
Yeah, it is. So you said something else as well that interested me, because when it was locked down, but you were in the woods, so you kind of had a lot of freedom. So your experience was different to everybody else's. And
I feel a bit guilty about that, so I don't usually say it very often. Here I am saying it on your podcast.
Because I had a similar experience, but for different reasons, because I work in healthcare. So I was like an essential worker, and I had to go to hospitals, I had to go to pharmacies, I had to go to shops for people, I had to go to people's houses. I was wandering around with all the freedoms of the world, and no traffic, no queues, and there's all these people like locked down having a terrible time. I had the best time of my life in the first lockdown. It was amazing. There was just nobody on the road. There was no traffic jams. Going backwards and forwards to work, it was amazing. If ever I had an idea of what it'd be like if the world disappeared, I briefly glimpsed it, and it was quite pleasant.
Yes, well, I'm glad that you had a positive COVID experience. I felt a bit guilty because I knew that others were suffering, and I had such a hard time having an enjoyable time when I knew others were suffering. So I felt very conscious of that. But it was a very productive time. And as it so happened, I was in the Berkshires where the novel takes place. And so it was all very conducive to bringing the Lunatic into the world.
Because it's interesting because that was something, the challenge of balancing that hyper-connected world. And I like the phrase that was emailed to me was, the challenges of balancing a hyper-connected world with the pursuit of a meaningful private life. And I just like, yeah, how do you do that?
Yes, it was a question that I had often asked myself before I started to write this novel. And if I may, the protagonist of the novel, who is a rare books librarian, Nell, in Manhattan, she has come to find, ironically, that she has a very hard time focusing on reading a book because she's so connected to her cell phone. And so she's constantly shifting back and forth between the book that she's reading and the allure of her cell phone. And then she experienced some other problems like hacking and internet surveillance. And it all leads her to leave her life behind in this drastic move in Manhattan and return to the woods of the Berkshires where she spent her childhood. And she takes this radical decision to respond to a question that she has asked herself. And it's the central question of the novel: is absorption possible in the great age of distraction? So she wants to see if she can answer this question herself by her own means. And she thinks she can't do so if she continues to have this smartphone addiction.
It is.
So I won't give away too much of the plot, but in a very dramatic way, she discards her smartphone and starts to cultivate a meaningful life on her own terms, and she plans her life accordingly so that she can go off the digital grid as a young woman of 28 in a world where, you know, all of her friends are on social media. And she makes the stand and sees what she can do with her life, and if she can be absorbed again.
But it's because it's one of the, while I had a new book delivered yesterday, and it, just to give it some, it's by a guy called Paul Lambert, and he's talking about his life as a hedge layer in the southwest of England, around Devon and Cornwall and Somerset. It's all he's done for 30 years. He started as an apprenticeship when he was 16, sort of thing, and he basically lives in the back of a truck and just drives around from wood to wood, farm to farm, sort of doing woodland crafts and hedge laying. And I found myself, as I was starting to read it, sort of nodding off, not because it was boring, but there was a part of my brain that's just like, no, you need to flick through to the next reel. And there was this part of me that I realised I can't remember when I sat down and last read a book.
Yes.
But I've always got a phone in my hand, and I have a collection of books that need to be read, and I just like, oh, and I wondered this morning if I've forgotten how to read a book. Not, do you know what I mean? Just the process of, I'm going to sit down and read a book
without your phone.
Yeah, because I never read anything electronically. I have to.
I meant without your phone sitting next to you.
Just like literally, I don't know what to do, because I can't remember the last time I actually just sat down in a chair with a book in my hand to read it.
And that was part of my interest in writing this novel as well, because I heard what you just said from a number of people who had said the same thing, even back in 2011 and then over the years. And I think I wanted to sort of write what that would be like, to actually be able to sit and read a book without the distractions that we face.
Did that come from somewhere else, though? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, is it an observation you had of other people? Or was it an observation you had with yourself?
It's an observation that I definitely had with other people, but yeah, I'm a funny example, because my lifelong passion, sitting in my office, and you can see that books might play a small role in my life. I have long loved books since I was a small child. So I think that it's always been sort of front and center in my life, the role of the book. But that being said, I would go away on a retreat and I would want to write or I'd want to read. And I did find that I would be brandishing my phone frequently, and I was a bit annoyed with myself. And so then I would take a day where I would just turn off the cell phone altogether and put it in a drawer and see how that went. And then I was kind of interested in pursuing this idea in a literary way. And as I said, it was one night that the whole idea came and landed in my mind. So I just had this sort of kernel of an idea, and then it came to me more developed, and I really wanted to write about it.
Yeah, because there's that. I can't remember whose quote it is, and I'm going to probably paraphrase it quite badly, but they talk about there's somebody somewhere sitting by a river listening to a waterfall who has no idea what's going on in the world, and you think they have a problem.
Yeah, I don't know this quote. I think it sounds marvelous.
Because we have this idea that if we don't know what's going on, we don't understand the world. You know, that there's this kind of strange obsession with politics, obsession with everything that's going on, and everybody has an opinion, and we literally do not realise there's people out there who have no idea what's going on in the UK today. I have no idea what's going on in Venezuela and 100 other countries, and we kind of get wrapped up that the whole world is on my phone. And if I'm on my phone, I must know what's going on.
Yes, I have a line in the novel. In fact, the reading I just gave in Toronto. It was I read this chapter out loud, and it's a line about how she had her whole life was contained in that phone. Do you mind if I just read it?
Of course, please do.
Yes. So this is after she has just discarded it in the most dramatic way possible. And I just read quickly. Quasi-horror rose like nausea in her esophagus at the loss of the phone she had relied on, cleaved to, adored at times. She had given it an aura in her adoration, created a commodity fetish out of it. Nell knew full well what her action represented. She had kept that same number since 2002. Her whole life was contained in that phone, in a sense, yet she resented that her life was contained in such a device. So that's just it. Our phones are contained in these devices, but then we kind of resent that they are contained in the devices. And I don't think it's such a bad thing to not know what's going on in the world, because even if you do know, maybe it's worse to know at this point in time, given the state of the world. But I think that it is a decision. It is a decision that has meaningful consequences at this point.
There's in that paragraph you read out, there was two words: commodity fetish, and that really echoed, because there's a kind of when I'm trying to think of, like, you know when you hear something above all of everything else that's said, and commodity fetish stood out because it's a really apt description, isn't it, of like,
yes.
Because before you and I started, we both said, "Oh, I'll just, we'll turn our phones down, switch them off, whatever, so we're not distracted by them." But it never occurred, and why? There's no reason for it. But why have both of us brought our phone to a Zoom meeting anyway, to a podcast? But we just do. We carry them around like there's a watch on our hand. It's like a small child that we give constant attention to. But actually, it's a fetish. It is a commodity, isn't it? Because it's just a load of junk. It's a load of information. It's
That's right.
and
Yeah.
when it's amazing the panic that can be that can grab everybody if I had it this morning. I walked my dog, and I have this, as I'm talking to you about it and about to explain, I realise I have this weird routine where my phone always goes in a pocket up here on the coat. And then when I take the phone out, when I get back from the walk, I take the phone out, put it down, and then obviously take the lead off the dog and all of that, and hang the coat up and everything. And I realise some mornings, if that gets slightly interrupted, I never know where I've placed the phone. And then at some point, when I've noticed that I don't know where the phone is, there's it's like, time out, everybody. I need to fix this major issue. And it's just like, and it's quite uncomfortable as I'm talking to you, because you start recognising just what a grip this parasite has on you.
Yes, it's so true. And talking about your dog, I in that same chapter, the protagonist has a dog, obviously. Usually when I write, there's a dog, and so I just have one more sentence there. Nell moved her hand down to pat Argos, and then remembered she hadn't brought him. She feared that he would chase after the object that he had confused with a living being, because in the novel earlier, he would go around and count the people, say at a party. So he would touch his nose to all the people, and then he would touch his nose to her phone, because she had given it such this aura that he had started to confuse it with a living being. And so I was, wondering if your dog ever noticed where your phone was before you did, or paid any particular attention to it.
I don't think so, because part of that routine follows that when she comes in, she gets her snacks. So she heads straight to the kitchen and just kind of stares at you if there's any delay in you getting there. It's just like, come on, mate.
The snacks would triumph over the phone any day for a dog, and rightly so.
Yeah, and she is one of those dogs that kind of sort of bumps her gums a little bit if you aren't paying attention to where you should be in her routine in the morning. It's just like, very good. Yeah, very good. This is well rehearsed, David. There's, you shouldn't be missing your lines here. She's one of the. She's a bossy dog. She is quite a bossy. She's a grumpy dog. She's actually a very old grumpy lady, and she likes her routine. But for whatever reason, we get on fabulously.
Yeah, perfect.
I like spoiling her, and she likes being spoilt, and it works. And
it works.
So, did I hear you right originally saying that this started in 2011?
Yes, I started writing it in 2011.
So what happened that it never the projectile vomit never followed?
Well, I think I told you I became gravely ill with Lyme disease.
Yeah. Sorry.
And I had been a university professor, and I had to stop teaching, and I spent 6 years gravely ill.
6 years.
Until I was able to, and I pursued every possible treatment and antibiotics, everything that one does with Lyme disease, and the doctors just kept saying, you have to adapt to this new normal, and it was not normal for me whatsoever. And I was at the point where I was contemplating assisted suicide, which I had never done. I've always been a carpe diem person, but I felt like I had no light to give to anyone anymore. And then by an odd series of events, I found this doctor in Siberia who was a doctor of dry fasting.
Yep.
And he actually took me on his first non-Russian Western patient. I traveled to the mountains of Siberia for 2 months, and I did these extraordinary dry fasts where I didn't eat or drink water for 9 days. And it completely cured my body of Lyme disease. And so I felt very compelled once I got my health back, to go home and write, well, this book, my first book, Starving to Heal in Siberia, my radical recovery from late-stage Lyme disease and how it could help others. So I did do a lot of projectile vomiting before the Lunatic, but I felt that this completely healed me from Lyme disease. I felt like I couldn't waste any time if it could heal other people. I went home and straight away I started writing Starving to Heal. So it was just, once I did that, then Soulmate Dog that we interviewed about that experience had happened. And I knew that could be pivotal for dogs and their people. So I was in a great rush to write those two books. And then I felt like I could open up the document with the Lunatic.
Yeah. So how was that experience then with doing the 9-day fast? Because I've done fasts where I still drink water and coffee, and I've done 6-7 days, I think is my longest.
Yep. So that's very, very far from a dry fast in which you do not consume a drop of water, you don't take a shower, you don't use lip balm, you certainly don't brush your teeth. You abstain from all substances going into your body or pores for 9 days. And so it's like a marathon runner training for a marathon. You don't just go out and dry fast for 9 days. So he put me through a period of cleansing. I went off all medications and coffee, and took things like activated charcoal. And then I did a 1-day, 24-hour dry fast, which was by far the worst, because your body adapts to it as you go on, David. So the 1 day, I felt like I was in the desert. And then the 3-day, I was grasping for water at the end of the 3 days. I mean, it was really theatrical. I think I was at the faucet just with my mouth open at the end of 3 days. But after that, my body was like, oh, I know what we're doing. We're dry fasting. This is fine.
Yeah.
And so when I did the 7-day first with him in Siberia, in the mountains, watching a river, he had me doing walks. Before that, I had been bedridden. So it was quite extraordinary to me that I was doing walks at all. And I just felt quite peaceful, like I could meditate. And they did some massage treatments and cupping and whatnot. And I literally felt, as the 7 days were going by, that my body was feeling better and better, even though I hadn't consumed any water or food. And then there was a rehabilitation period between where I, of course, ate and drank again. And then we did the 9 days. So it was this fractional process of working up to the 9 days, which he said was the magical number for the body to go into this state of autophagy and start eating its own compromised cells. So then when I did the 9-day, I have to say it was relatively painless. I just kept feeling better as the days were going by. I knew I was supported by this medical doctor. And at the end of the 9 days, well, you're very tired when you break the fast, even if you felt good. When you start hydrating with hot water, it's like tea-like water. It's carrying out all of these compromised cells. And so you feel tired. So you sleep a couple of days. But when I left Siberia, I mean, I wrote in my book, I said I felt like I had reincarnated into my 17-year-old body, and I was just shining and bouncing. And I have my ups and downs. I'm 50 years old, but I feel like I'm shining and bouncing. And that was 7 years ago. I mean, I've written 3 books in the last 7 years, and I'm training for a marathon, and I go skiing all the time. So I think it worked.
Yeah, no, I
say that it worked.
I say to last month, just because of the way shift patterns worked, somebody was off sick and somebody else was on holiday. I just like, I can just do 48-hour shifts. It's fine, and because there's sleeping shifts where I work anyway, so. It's it just means you're not driving to and forward, back and from work all the time. And I just like, I haven't done a fast this year. So this was in February. So it's just like for the next 5 weeks, I think it was, I just did a 48-hour fast every week. So but I lost track. So I'd eat on Sunday with the family, Sunday dinner. Then I'd go to work for Monday morning. But the last meal would be that Sunday at about somewhere between 3 and 4 o'clock. And I noticed I was losing track and not eating again until sort of Wednesday lunchtime. So what was supposed to be 48 hours. And it's hard to explain to people that, no, once you kind of get past a point, you're just like, oh, no, you don't notice. You actually don't notice.
It's right. Your body kind of, I think sometimes your body just wants to do it. Your body just wants to go through a rest period, or wants to let go of some excess things, or just cleanse itself. And it's true. Actually, I still dry fast because my doctor, Sergey Filonov, who runs dry fasting treats now actually in Montenegro, because it's hard for people to get to Siberia during the war, and happily, my book has helped a lot of people, so I get a lot of messages from people thanking me for saving their lives, and that's very, very meaningful for me. But you get to a point in the dry fasting where I sort of look forward to the times when I dry fast, because it's just a period of rest. My organs are sort of on rest, and I know that my body is clearing various things, and so I think it's a natural process of self-healing, and I'm a major advocate for it, as you can imagine.
Yeah, no, I do believe that, because pretty much every religion has some form of fasting involved. It's a period.
That's right. I mentioned that in my book too. Yeah.
And I'm sure that's just some instinctual thing that humans knew that they should do, that every now and again you should abstain from any intake and just let your body clear itself out.
That's right. And it's interesting to me too, because in the beginning, other Lyme patients would come to me and ask for tips, and I've stopped doing that. I'm not a medical doctor, and I feel it's best. And nothing happened. Everything went very, very well. I'm not a dry fasting coach. I'm a Right. So, but they would say to me, I'm having a spiritual experience and I'm not a spiritual person. Did this happen to you? And well, yes, it did. I just felt myself I am a spiritual person, but I felt myself, I just would naturally go into meditating. And nearly everyone who has spoken with me about dry fasting has experienced some version of that was unexpected. So I do think that there is a connection to fasting and spirituality.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that.
I know either. It says as mysterious as the muses.
But I do, like I'm 100% on board on these type of experiences. But the thing that, very similar to you, if I know that, I always plan my fasts in advance, because I wean myself off carbs and sugars about 3 or 4 weeks before, and I will literally only eat animal products. And I'm not some crazy carnivore advocate. I just know that if I try to just go completely cold turkey, it's going to be an horrendous experience for a couple of days. Whereas if I get,
especially with the coffee.
Yeah, if I know, I still drink coffee. I won't ever.
Okay. Yeah. I won't say anything.
Yeah, I know it's strictly not what you're supposed to do. Do you know what? I think my fear of not drinking coffee is if I ever stopped drinking it, I might not drink it again, because I'm a bit like that. And the reason that matters, because there is my espresso. I have a proper like barista machine and all of that. It's coffee is a bit of a passion. It's more than just a drink. I like making my own coffee every day and tampering it, and I like the beans. I like weighing them out. There's this whole ritual around it for me. And
yes, there's a lot of coffee drinking in the Lunatic.
Yeah.
And in the book boxes that we sent out to some of the social media influencers, there was a decision about whether to do ground beans or whole beans, and I was like, sacrilegious! They must be whole beans.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm sensitive to your passion there.
Yeah.
But for now, I mean, I stopped drinking coffee before my long dry fast.
See?
Oh, yes. And then every time, sometime after the dry fast is done, I go back to drinking my coffee. But the first couple of times that I gave it up, the headache, but it's transcendent, to say the least.
Okay. I,
The coffee headache, the coffee withdrawal headache is spectacular.
I have heard this, and I do think I'm afraid of it. I don't hide from that. I do think
You should be afraid of it if you drink coffee as much as I think you do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I have my 2 cups a day in the morning, but I've probably been doing that for 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, he's just, and the idea of not having coffee is just yeah. I know I should try. I know I should, but there's a part of me. There's a part of me that's just like, everything about it I know I should, and it's one of those, like, if you do this, it's going to kill you. Yeah, I know, but I have to do it. And so it's just something about it. It's just I'm not. I'll do anything as long as I don't have to stop drinking coffee.
Yes, yes, it is a favorite substance.
You know, I've stopped smoking. I barely drink. I've stopped all these other things. But people are like, so
but don't take my coffee.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You can take almost anything off me, but not my coffee. And
yes, but then.
And it's just, but I'm going to change off that because it's just making me feel very miserable. The idea of, I don't know whether it's the idea of taking coffee away from me or just refusing to have any discipline to try that experiment.
Yeah, I will say that you know, every time that I do a long dry fast, I taper off the coffee and then it's fine and it's painless. But a cold turkey is a disaster. So a nice taper, and then it's perfectly painless. And then when you have your first cup of coffee again after the dry fast, it is marvelous.
Do you get good sleep in the dry fast?
But that's a very good question. I happen to get excellent sleep. I sleep profoundly during the dry fast. This is not the case for everyone. There are readers of Starving to Heal, and I know that there are readers of Dr. Filonov's books who suffer from not sleeping so well during the dry fast. I think that there are ways to meditate around that, and I think some people, if you're frightened of the dry fast, I think you tend to sleep less well. If you embrace and trust the process, I think that you sleep better. So I happen to sleep so profoundly well that I welcome the dry fasting because it's a very restful time.
So, and just to reiterate to anybody listening to this, we're not medical. We're not advising anyone to do it. We're just sharing our experiences. And in our experience, if you are going to do this, do not try this for more than 24 hours for your first time.
Absolutely.
Start weaning yourself off 4 weeks before you start anything. Trust us, that's the best way.
That is the best way. It would be very dangerous for anyone to just start a 9-day dry fast without any preparation, and I do not advise that whatsoever. In the appendix to my book, Starving to Heal, I include a protocol, a safe protocol, to lead oneself into a short dry fast. After that, I suggest consulting with Dr. Filonov, and he does Zoom consultations. And then he's the medical doctor and the world's only medical doctor who supervises these dry fasts at these times. So indeed, do proceed with caution.
Definitely. Just bringing it back to the book, The Lunatic. Did you say she worked in an antique bookstore?
She is, at the outset, she is a rare books librarian at the New York Public Library in Manhattan.
Because I'm always one of the things I love about a setting like that is you can go in any direction with a story. It can be mythical, you can go down sci-fi fantasy, you can go down wizards and witches, you can go down the occult, you can go down the conspiracy theories with the Masons, you can go down to like family lines with politics. Do you know what I mean? Because when it's old rare books, it's the start of the story it can be led anywhere, because you can have the one where somebody stumbles across a book, you can have the idea that somebody comes in to buy a book and there's some conflict. And the reason I mention this is for people that are trying to write books, it's little snippets like that enable you to just, okay, I can start a story, I can take a story here, I can go down a journey this way. And you can put in, like, when I think of anything that's rare or antiquity, you can bounce an idea off that's endless.
Yes, absolutely. The reason that she is a rare books librarian is not to go down those marvelous paths that you suggested, but because it just compounds the irony of the fact that she's devoted her life to being a librarian, to working in archives, and she finds herself just as susceptible as the next person to a smartphone addiction when the purpose of her life and career has been to be absorbed in archives and books and marvelous projects such as those. And so I found it even more perplexing that this character was confronted by the same level of distraction as others who weren't nearly as absorbed as she was.
Do you think, does that reflect any way in your own feelings about yourself?
Not at all. Not at all. I am not this protagonist. I want to make it very clear.
No. But is it something?
I'm not the protagonist. I'm actually not any character in this book, and I'm not a rare books librarian either. If you could see a photo of my desk right now, I've been up at 5 a.m. the last couple of days because I'm writing an academic article on meta-theatrical games and Kundera's Festival of Insignificance, which requires a great deal of absorption. And I haven't even given a thought about my phone while I'm working on this article, which is frequently the case. When I'm writing, I turn off my modem and I just, because I don't want to hear the various clicks and things of emails coming in. And so, I don't.
So is this just an observation you've had of people then?
I mean, we did talk about this, that I see it in other people, and then I've had times where, like I said, I've had times where I would go away and I would feel that I was still, looking at my phone more than I wanted to. But in terms of my own level of absorption, my own is intact.
Because that's I think you're probably the first writer I've come across because what I mean by this is often when we see something that's an integral part of the protagonist, it either comes from an inner reflection, good or bad. Like sometimes we're like, yeah, I'm like that, but like the fact we're like that, but just flip it on its head so that this person is stunned by it and disappointed in themselves, that it eats away. But with you, it's just like, no, it's nothing to do with me whatsoever.
No, I feel that actually I'm quite in alignment with the French philosopher, literary critic Roland Barthes, who wrote about the death of the author in relationship to the work. I think that once the work has been written, the work is autonomous on its own, and I, as the author, would like to just stand up back and not be implicated in the interpretation of the book.
Yeah.
I am not the book. The book is not me. I did write the book. But after that, I think it stands on its own. And these characters lived in my imagination, and I'm fond of them, but I don't identify myself with them.
When you were writing this book originally, the internet, social media wasn't what it is today, because
Well, I would say that well, maybe not Instagram, but Facebook was wild and well, and at the time I had many friends who spoke about how much it was sucking their time, quote.
Okay.
When I first started out in 2011, but of course when I went back to it in 2019 and then was revising it in 2020 during COVID, I think that social media, was, it
But I
was.
just wonder if there was some sort of subconscious prediction going on.
I think that there was. I think that there was, because the state at the time, I think that it's far more the case now than it was then, even though it was, internet surveillance, hacking, these smartphone addictions, social media addiction. We were starting to talk about them, but not as much as we do now. But I think that those things worried me. And then I was also someone who grew up in a way that many others my age did not grow up, and still don't put me in my novel, David. I didn't have a television when I was growing up. So I never had a television. So I was a musician, and music and books were tremendously important to me. So I spent my childhood reading books and playing music, and so I didn't have this initial distraction that other people my age had in the form of television, which then grew into other distractions. Maybe unless you want to call books distractions, which you very well could.
No, the reason I smile is because since I've been doing the podcast, obviously I talk to people more and more. Like, I think I'm 195 episodes. I think this will be 195, and it's kind of spanned over 5 years. The thing that there's this, but bearing in mind that I talk to a lot of authors, which isn't deliberate. They just seem to be the people that get in touch. But the thing that there's this common theme, and it does obviously sit into age groups, but I've learned, like just through conversations all the time, you kind of start reflecting more and more on the conversations that I have with people. And there seems to be this clear line with upbringings. So I'm 50, I was born in 74, and there's this benefit that we have that I've put down to boredom. That when we were children, if you didn't do something, you got bored. And because there wasn't sometimes anything to do. So a new magazine, as daft as it sounds, when your weekly or monthly magazine came out, you would scan that magazine, read the standout articles, then you started reading all of the articles, then you're reading the adverts, then you're reading who the editor is, and you'd carry that magazine around with you, and you would read it several times before the next one came out. But we did it out of boredom, but it was also the same reason why you would go and walk 5 miles, because you heard there'd been a car accident or something had happened in another town, because you actually had nothing else to do. But that's also why, if somebody said, all right, you wanted to learn something, you were excited to go to the library on a Monday. Oh, well, I'm not going to get there till Saturday. But you'd be looking forwards to that Saturday, because, right, I'm going to find out about this, and I'm going to research this. And we did all of these tasks that took time and stretched time out for us, because if we didn't, we got bored. And boredom was a great motivator. And if I talked to my niece, when we're finished, I've got to pick my niece up. We're going off-roading tomorrow. And so we're like, we've got to go and get some stuff. But if I try and explain to her that the idea that I might go in have a project to do as a kid or as a teenager that might take 4 or 5 weeks to complete is horrifying to her. Whereas when I was her age, I would be so excited that I might be building something, or something's going to take 5 or 6 weeks, if not 3 months, because it occupied me. And I just, like I said, every time I try and deconstruct the big difference that we could get bored, whereas children today can't get bored because they've got smartphones, they've got the internet. We never had that. And boredom created this curiosity and incentive to do something.
Yes. I think that's a very intuitive point and an important one. I do think that boredom leads to creativity.
Yeah.
Boredom can give birth to ideas, and there is a value to boredom. I also think our brain needs a bit of stillness and space before it broaches the next thing. And the smartphone takes away that ability. It's like Steve Jobs said that he would never give a tablet or a phone to any of his children because he knew.
But because when we were younger, you would never say, I don't like that. I'm not doing that. You did anything and everything, because what else did you have to do?
I think it's accurate, and I think it's important. It was certainly a different way of approaching imagination, creativity, learning, even socializing with others. And I think there's tremendous value to that. And I hope that boredom doesn't get lost entirely. I hope there's a comeback for boredom, because I do think that boredom leads somewhere. It's not a stagnating pool. It's not a dead end.
I think for our generations, anybody pre-internet, boredom was the foundation to everything we ever achieved, because it's what lifted us to do something. Because
that's quite a statement. Thank you so much for having me, David. It's lovely to be on your podcast again. And I hope that if you get a chance to read the Lunatic, that you really like it.
And there you have it. And I'd never heard about the 9-day fast. It's something I might look into. But I am still, and always will be, interested in social media and the disconnect and how society is going to evolve, whilst being somebody that relies on it and uses it. But as always, thank you very much for watching, for listening, for the support, the comments. And as always, wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.